Now, I know y'all thinking the same thing I was thinking. I'm glad it wasn't one of us. And when I sit down and I think about this story of this drug trafficking cocaine case that happened at Penn State, it's ironic to me, not just about how they went about telling the story, but the information that they used to get the narrative across. And this make me think about a lot of things. I remember when they first broke the case, they didn't even attach no images to the young men that was a part of it. And right then and there, I knew what the race of the students was. Because I understood that this happened at HBCU and it was young black men, automatically they attached images of who was a part of that case to us. But being that it was 14 young black men, a part of white fraternities, there was no images attached. And when they decided to attach the images, they showed them to be in suits. And it's just so ironic to me because it reminds me of a lot of cases that happened this year, and even some from my childhood. The first one I think about is the one of Caleb Wilson, a young man that died in Louisiana as he was pledged to become a part of Omega. But it wasn't just the image of Caleb Wilson, but the 3 young men that was a part of the case. They too were students, but they didn't show those young black men in suits, which I understood that those young black men had because as part of the fraternity members, we all have suits as we attend conferences each year. But they decided to show images to show those young black men to also be threats because that's the only images that would help to justify the narrative and to strip them of their humanity. The second story I didn't think of is the one of Carmelo Anthony because the first images we seen when they was telling that story was him in a suit, but they couldn't wait to replace that one of his mugshot. And that's the one we still see on surfacing on internet today. Because they understand that in order to justify the narrative of portraying this young black man to be a threat to those 4 white students that tried to hurt him, they needed to pick the certain image in order to justify the narrative of him being a threat. But then it reminded me of a young man I remember seeing it in media when I was 12 years old. And that's of Trayvon Martin. When he was killed by George Zimmerman. And in order to justify his death, they used certain images. They didn't want to use the image of him with his father because that would restore his humanity as a young black man and showed his innocence. But they had to use the image to also show him to be a threat and showed him with his middle finger up, which image I remember vividly seeing. So when I think about these stories and how the news go about telling certain narratives, depending on who it is that's a part of the story, they use certain images in order to justify some people to be innocent, but also to portray some people as guilty. So I want us all to be mindful of the narratives that we accept, but also the ones that we normalize. For we all just one journalist away from being depicted as the suspects, even though we are the victims.